You dropped out of B school to take a year to go surfing. Is this true?
This is true, and it's probably one of the best decisions I ever made in life. It was probably the catalyst for all of the success that I've had in my career. I never would have found my way into this wonderful world of technology and startups were it not for dropping out of school to go on a round the world surf trip. If we know that like the playing field is going to be filled with way more collisions, way more crashes than even previous vintages, I think like your underwriting of a founder, the only thing that you can really do is like underwrite them on like how fast are they going to be able to adapt, change, understand, navigate the game on the field. And like I think like the core of that is customer obsession.
Hello, friends. Before we start this week's episode, I just wanted to share a bit of really sad news. Last Tuesday, we learned that the community of GPs and solo GPs in particular lost a really dear friend and treasured part of our ecosystem. I learned Ali Jamal from First Check Ventures had passed, and I'm devastated by his loss. If you work in the ecosystem, you know he was dedicated to LATAM. He found deals before all of us, and he was just such a darn good investor. He was a better human being. When I was thinking about starting Sidecut, he was one of the first people who said, collaborated with me, wanted to show me what I knew and what he knew, and he's just one of the best people. He's sorely missed. It'd be remiss, and it's to not mention it on a podcast dedicated to solo GPs because, damn, we lost a good one. So that's it. Rest in peace, Ali. We miss you, brother. And we'll get on with the episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Alone Together. I'm your host, Mike Ma. I'm also sometimes the managing partner of Sidecut Ventures, and I am excited to have John Gleeson on today from Success VP. We have never really, before our pre-call, got to hang out, but John is someone in the industry I have grown to respect from afar, and he's built such an awesome firm based at the corner of value add around customer success. And as someone who lives and breathes and dies this for myself, I'm just so excited to have you on the show. And thank you for coming on. It means the world for you to be here.
Oh man, I'm super stoked. I'm honored that you'd invite me to be on the show. So let's do it. Let's get down to business.
I get to do some research before, since we didn't know each other. Most of the guests I get a chance to know from a previous life. We've done a deal together. We've worked together in the New York area or something. So I had to go deep for you. And what's really cool is on your LinkedIn, your image is of a surfer. And so I was like, oh, what is this guy about? And then I found on this podcast, what you told me now is a good decade old, like, you dropped out of B school to take a year to go surfing. Is this true?
This is true, and it's probably one of the best decisions I ever made in life. It was probably the catalyst for all of the success that I've had in my career. I never would have found my way into this wonderful world of technology and startups were it not for dropping out of school to go on a round the world surf trip.
So, okay, snowboarder, surfer, this is why we vibe. What did you learn from surfing that you use in venture today? How has that informed who you are as a venture capitalist? I'm so curious to learn more about that.
There's so many metaphors there, I think. But maybe I'll get to the metaphor and I'll tell you even just like why that was such a good idea to drop out of school. Or like, I don't know if it was a good idea, but how it like, crystallized this whole career in technology. So like backstory on me, I grew up about as far from the ocean as you could possibly grow up. I lived in Ottawa, Canada for most of my childhood, and I played hockey. So again, like frozen water, in my head as a kid, I was going to go to the NHL. And I made it pretty far. And when that all ended for me, one summer I was like, maybe I'll move to Hawaii and I'll learn how to surf. That'll be a good deflection off of this thing that I had worked my whole life hockey on to just get my mind off of that. So moved to Hawaii, learned how to surf, fell in love with surfing. I'd always been an entrepreneur my whole life. When I stopped playing hockey, I had started a hockey school. So that's another thing we have in common. You're a coach, you're a teacher. I had this hockey school. I learned that the hockey school would run without me. I had a great staff and we really found let's call it a good product market fit there. So I was always just like very entrepreneurial. And when I was at business school, I had the hockey school running remotely. And I also had, surfing was on my mind a lot. I had this, connection to surfing. And so halfway through my MBA, I was in Nova Scotia, Canada, where you can surf. And I was like, man, I've got this business. It's spitting off tons of cash flow. It's working with me not in the business day to day. I'm doing school. I'm having a lot of fun surfing here in Nova Scotia. Like maybe I should just put my studies on hold for a year and go on a round the world surf trip. So that's what I did. I went on this round the world surf trip for a year, surfed every wave that, you're a snowboarder. So, you have this bucket list of places that you've seen in magazines or you've seen in videos and you're like, man, I would love to go there. So I, did a winter on the North Shore of Oahu. You went to Fiji, New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia, to some really remote places in Indo. And when I came back, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, when I finished business school. And I had this chance encounter with a professor. And actually, I went to the professor because there was posters all around the school. Yvon Chouinard was going to be coming to our school in Nova Scotia, Canada, to talk. For folks who don't know, Yvon Chouinard is the founder of Patagonia. He's,
Let my people go surfing.
Exactly. Right. So I'd read that book on my trip, Let My People Go Surfing. I thought, man, this guy is a rebel. This is an outside thinker. I got to meet Yvon Chouinard when he comes to my school. So I found the professor that was bringing Yvon Chouinard to the school to speak. And I thought, maybe post graduation, I could, make the play and I'll go work for Patagonia. That would be pretty cool. Anyways, I got to meet Yvon Chouinard. That was awesome. But it was the professor who really changed my life. The lean startup. So Steve Blank, there's a bunch of books written on it now. Well, at the time, that was kind of a new concept. Harvard was piloting it. It obviously came out of Stanford. Berkeley was, had the lean startup program. And my professors had met Steve Blank on this trip. And they said, hey, like we're going to be, one of the first schools or the first school in Canada to pilot the lean startup course. Steve Blank is actually going to teach it remotely and we'll do a flipped classroom. Like you're an entrepreneur, you've got the story, you dropped out of school, you ran a business, remotely while traveling the world surfing. Like you're the type of person that like should be in our class. And I was like, sweet, yeah, that sounds cool. Sign me up. And that was like, man, that was the pop for my life, really, because I learned about this, the ultimate equalizer, which is software. Like I learned that anybody could build a company with, because of the cloud, because of software. And I learned the methodology for building these software companies and joined a startup as the first hire out of that class. And the rest is really history. So yeah, drop out of school is the lesson.
That's awesome. Let's go into like, I want to put a pin in and talk about like the lessons learned and actually how we think about startups and the startup school and sort of draw a line between, let's say Nova Scotia, Steve Blank, and then to later, what your thesis is as success VP. But I'd be remiss.
You want the surfing analogy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I don't even care about an analogy. I'm just, if the answer is nothing more than just like, I'm grateful for the history that it played in my life, that's great. But I'm curious, is there any, is there some part of the actual doing and acting and community of surfing that informs how you actually make decisions or work today as a venture capitalist, surfing qua surfing, just to add some definition to your history?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. So like just number one, like surfing is all about being in the right spot in the ocean at the right time to catch, the best wave. I've spent time surfing with some of the best surfers in the world, and the thing that really separates the great surfers from the okay ones is actually their positioning. They don't have to paddle all that hard to catch the right wave. And they have incredible positioning, and they sit in the right spot in the ocean, and they really like leverage the force of the ocean to generate speed and propel the best ride. And the biggest wave gives you the best ride. And I think like in startups, the same is true. I saw that. So I've been, really my career has spanned only two startups. One was as the first hire. The other was again as a very early hire. That second one went from, a million in ARR when I joined to $300 million in ARR when I left. And, that company will probably, IPO at some point. It's worth over $3 billion now. And I learned everything about like market timing, positioning, and product market fit from that startup. I thought I knew a market timing. I thought I knew product market fit in that first startup. It was really when I saw, Motive take off and go through hyper growth. We failed at a lot of things internally. There was more things that we probably messed up internally than we got right. But that market positioning and the product market fit, there was such a pull that maybe sometimes in spite of ourselves, we still got this incredible ride. And so I think a lot about that when it comes to investing. Like I think the why now is a really, really important question and deeply plugs into that surfing analogy. But even that, I think surfing is just anybody who's a good surfer, like a really competent surfer, is absolutely obsessive. I think there's a lot in common with a really good surfer and a really good entrepreneur because surfing it's not a sport that you can do casually. It's not like you roll up to the tennis court on Tuesday at 11 a.m. and say, okay, we're going to, smash the ball around for an hour. It's like, no, you need to create some sort of space in your life so that when the waves are firing, you're able to reorganize your entire life to be there. And so the type of person that it draws in is just an incredibly obsessive person. You learn what obsession looks like by hanging out with surfers. And unfortunately, I haven't quite oriented my entire life so that I can drop everything to surf as much as I want. But I certainly am around a lot of folks who have created these really successful lives and are able to go surfing on, Tuesday at 11 a.m. when the tide is just right and the wind is perfect in the building. And I think that same kind of obsession is again something you need to look for in founders. You need to find that person who will orient the universe around their obsession. So those are probably the two big things.
Yeah, let's jump on that. I mean, because I see that you write the best updates, and you are such a prolific content writer, and the idea of founder-led customer success rings through in everything. So I'm just going to continue the metaphor. We can go back into, to me, I think that's your surfboard, right? Like founder-led customer success is the board you've picked and the timing. Can you say more about how, your time, and we're skipping a lot of your history because, which is amazing from heading, customer success and Motive to all the, but I'm really curious if you bring this, why is that now? Why is the wave? You have the right board, and maybe if you want to talk a little about Success VP, and the center parts, the superpower of the board is your notion of customer success and founder-led customer success, because we invest roughly at the same stage at pre-seed and seed.
Yeah.
Why is that the best board, and how did you come to this to catch this particular wave now for these type of founders? Say more about that fit and what gets you so fired up about that.
Yeah. So in that first startup, I joined pre-product market fit, pre-product really. I moved to New York City with some vaporware and knocked on every door in New York City. we got in the door and we built a little bit, and eventually, we sold a little bit, and I became, the first sales leader. But it was really like in working with our first customers that we understood what to build. It was knowing those customers at this intimate level that informed our roadmap. Like, we were folks from Nova Scotia, Canada, working on some of the biggest ad campaigns in the world in New York City. Like, we were outsiders, but it was by getting really, really close to that customer, learning about them with, let's say, a beginner mindset, and just like, engulfing ourselves in their world, that we were able to find an inkling of product market fit. So I've always thought, like, it wasn't in like selling to that customer that we found product market fit. It was in working with them. It was like in delivering the value that we promised them. Customers come to you with a pain point, and your job is to solve that pain point. And it's not when they sign up to work on the pain point, it's when you actually like renew them. It's when they say, hey, look, like, you delivered on the value, that beta customer, that design partner converts to a real customer, or that first customer renews for the first time. That's where you really find product market fit. And so I call that like founder-led customer success. Everybody talks about founder-led sales, but the reality, it's sales. Of course, you need to get in the door, but it's delivering value, and delivering value is really what customer success is responsible for. So that's like the special thing. And I knew that from my being at the earliest, like, spark of finding product market fit. From a like why now perspective, the why now is so strong for knowing your customers at a very, very deep level. If you think about it, like, this technology shift, this AI technology shift, is moving at a faster pace than any shift that's come before it. Multiples faster than the cloud, way faster than mobile, way faster than social. And everybody is struggling to keep up. Everybody, and I think like that's going to be true for a while. We're at the very bottom of this AI S curve, and the technology, you think about, the speed at which the chips are getting better. If you think about the speed at which the algorithms are getting better, it's just stacking at a very rapid pace. And so the technology is changing very quickly, but the constant is a customer. And so my core thesis is that founders who know their customers at a deeper level than their competitors, founders who are like absolutely obsessive about their customers, willing to run through walls to know them very, very well, are the ones that are going to win in this environment. So I think customer success is more relevant than ever before. And then just from like a winning perspective, like, you probably see this with your own value prop, to deal. Every deal that I wanted to get in, I've won. In some cases, founders have set up special term sheets to work with me. In some cases, they've opened up closed rounds to work with me. And the reason for that is, like, they are living this pain point. We invest at seed and pre-seed. Well, it's the founder who's doing the sales. It's the founder who's doing support. And so when I meet with that founder for the first time, and I tell them, about, the things that I know in support and professional services and customer success and account management, they're like, I'm doing that right now. I'm living that right now. And so many people have written about founder-led sales, but really nobody has, talked about everything that comes after you get that first customer. Yeah. And it's like a savior. So it's really, really cool. So I just think like the why now is so strong. I get so fired up, as you can tell, about this value prop.
Me too. I mean, I'm a little bit more on the customer discovery, go to market traction, but I think what I'm taking from this is, what I wrote down in my notes is like, John's view of AI is be a better human. And the best founders are the best humans connecting to other humans and making their humans, which are customers, successful. And I just think there's so much beauty in that about the fund. Can you double click on that for me a little bit? Like, and the audience, like, what does that mean in terms of when you find, how does it come up in your diligence process? What is a founder who's obsessed about customers and those who are less so, and what are the markers for you? How do you assess it?
Yeah. So I think like it really, really helps, I think, in investing to have like an archetype, or, maybe if you're lucky, several archetypes of like what great looks like. And so I got to see firsthand what a truly hell-bent founder on their customer looks like. So Shoaib Makani, he's the founder of Motive. I was in a lot of Monday management and got pushed really hard at times by Shoaib to understand our customers, right? As the chief customer officer in a company, your job is to know the customer at a deeper level than anybody else in the company, right? The company comes to you for insights about what makes the customer tick. And Shoaib was just like unrelenting in understanding our customers. And I was trying to keep pace with his rapid pace in which he was understanding the market, understanding our customers. Shoaib, learns faster than most people. And here I am, it's my full-time job to know our customers. And, I'm struggling to keep pace with Shoaib, who is also running the entire company. And so I think like that's the marker. It's like, a founder who is picking up on the subtleties, understanding, the 5 whys behind a customer and why they do things. That's what I'm looking for every time. And so, I had the privilege of getting to know Shoaib actually pretty early in the Motive journey too. And that was the constant. A lot evolved in that founder. You're going to get better at public speaking. You're going to get better at sharing your vision. You're going to get better at, hiring and recruiting and things like that. But that obsession was like the through line. I moved, from New York City to San Francisco. My wife was 3 months pregnant. We bought a house sight unseen at like peak Bay Area prices. That for Shoaib and Motive and Obaid Khan, who's the other co-founder. And that's like what real conviction looks like. And so I try and like harness that in every investment that I make.
How do you, can I ask how you, like from a mechanic standpoint, the actual underwriting process, like what do you look for? What's on your DD list? Do you like listen to customer logs? Do you watch them? Like how do you actually get to conviction that this is like Shoaib? Like, yep, they got that. They got that mojo.
Yeah. So I think like sometimes VCs, want to feel like they're the smartest person in the room. And in most cases, we are not, right?
Oh.
In fact, we should not be, when it comes to a company and it comes to their customers, we should not be the smartest person.
Yes. Amen. I say the same. It's like, look, I've spent, you've lived this thing your whole life. And, if it's a diligence call, like depending, I literally will say like, I have spent 36 minutes on your business. So please answer these questions with that in mind. Amen, brother. Amen.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's like you've quit your job at Palantir, you've quit your job at, rocket ship XYZ to do this. Like, so I'm really testing on like, how deep does their knowledge of their customer go? When I start to ask like, the why that matters or how that, I'm looking for, breadth of customer discovery and depth of like the whys behind it. And I think it's so cool now in that like we can jump on a call, and I don't know about you, but like, I'm doing like a deep research report on a space beforehand. I'm running that report, and you get a really good sense of competitive landscapes very early. And so you can come up to speed in 15 minutes way faster than you ever could. And so if I'm pulling things like, they've got to be able to beat the AI in their understanding of the customer. And that's something that I use. And then sometimes, like I don't love, running super fast on a deal. Sometimes you have to, like that's the nature of this. And especially, a fund like me, I don't lead rounds. So sometimes you have to move quickly. But I'm really looking for even an evolution in their depth of understanding from the moment I meet them to when the deal gets done.
Yes.
And an excitement and an evolution. And I want the customer stories to slip into the conversations. Like, oh my God, like we just got off of like this call with customer XYZ. They are telling us this, you know, here's why this is exciting and here's why this fits into our roadmap. This is so validating. Like I'm looking for, and you know, everybody's going to have a different tone and way that they talk. And I'm looking for those kind of like archetypal stories in conversation. Because I saw that all the time with Shoaib at Motive. Like I remember being at a Christmas party and, you know, it just would slide into his conversation. Like, oh, I just got back from Nashville, Tennessee, where we met with this customer and they're telling us this. And like, oh, this is going to be on our roadmap. And like, I'm looking for the stories.
Yeah. I mean, something you said resonates with so much. We talked a little about how, like, why we overlap in theses, like from the beginning of the diligence process to like kind of where, as the deal progresses, like it's really cool to see the passion and growth, right? There's some like, not that they'll solve all their customer problems and, you know, success problems in the course of first meeting to final check, but like, I don't know. It's cool to see the progress, and you can. I don't know how you feel when you think about what you get excited about founders. Like you start to see where the if it's this much growth in this little. Oh my God! Imagine when time gets bigger and capital gets bigger. Man, the sky's the limit, right?
And I think too, like that's like what we're underwriting. And I actually
Yes.
think like the underwriting process right now is harder than maybe previous vintages. Like, you know, like there's so much more I think that's gonna evolve because of AI, just workflows at large. Like when we think about, you know, let's say like the shift to the cloud, largely like these were things that, you know, at least the first wave of cloud things, these were things that existed in an on-prem world and they were basically, you know, digitized to the cloud. You know, it was a lot of like digital transformation. I think of like mobile as being like an unlock in some ways on the cloud, or you know, accelerating where the world could go. Christina Shen is a friend. She has a fund called Chemistry. A couple of weeks ago, we hosted at SaaStr Annual. Christina did a great conversation with Ross Beesman. Ross is the CRO at ServiceTitan. And I've talked to Christina, who was an early investor in ServiceTitan, and the cloud unlock coupled with mobile was what propelled ServiceTitan into existence. It was that mobile, you know, out of pocket. It unlocked this new area of worker that previously, like, you know, you didn't have access to. And when I think about like this AI wave, like rolling out, like we don't know where that cloud plus mobile, you know, intersection happens right now. There's a lot that's going to change. And I would probably be willing to bet that there's like more of those like technology collisions ahead of us than in past, you know, technology shifts. And so if we know that like the playing field is, you know, going to be filled with way more collisions, way more crashes than even previous vintages, I think like your underwriting of a founder, the only thing that you can really do is like underwrite them on like how fast are they going to be able to adapt, change,
Yes.
understand, navigate the game on the field. And like I think like the core of that is customer obsession.
Yes. Again, you and I, we have to do it. We will celebrate when we do a deal together because we share so much in terms of how we think about the world. And when I hear you talk about underwriting being hard around this, because I don't know what you're seeing, and we could talk about, you know, we're all competing for capital and fundraising. You know, I had Charles Hudson on 3 or 4 episodes ago, and since he's been on, I can't get this out of my mind. It's like the pre-seed world now is cut up into Artisan funds and algorithmic funds. And when you say underwriting is hard, let's just say we were picking, you know, we're doing like a YC secondary fund, like it's not, right? Or an index fund, which is algorithmic and people understand. With all deference and respect, like I'm putting you squarely in the Artisan camp of like you underwrite that human, that carbon-based life form, and their caring of other humans, namely their customers. And that's tough, as you said. I'm curious if how you see your commentary on that, like this pre-seed and early stage, like Algorithmic versus Artisan. Does that resonate with you? And do you have any commentary if you do? And if not, we can also just like throw that question aside and go on to the next thing.
Man, I think I should definitely listen to the episode with Charles. I
You
haven't
also
done.
can read a Substack. If you don't want to listen to the episode, like he wrote a Substack, which is really cool. Like, what is the future of venture capitalism today? And he read it. And because of course it's nice. And Charles, love you. Talking next week. I love that he can talk about all this because he's him and he closed Fund 5. You know, you and I are Fund 1 people, so he's got different problems.
Yeah.
But you could read it as well. But
Oh,
anyway,
I think, but I think like, without reading the article,
yeah,
I think like, yeah, you really see that happening on both ends of the barbell, right?
yeah,
You know, you see like the big funds, bigger than ever before. So there's a certain like market capture that's going to happen there. And then, YC, like I think a lot of people turn their noses up to YC because the valuations are so high and things like that. But if you think about it, it's like I love YC. I cannot wait for YC Demo Day. I think it's the best event ever. It's like you can sit there and you can watch, what is it, 50 of this vintages for that 6-month period of arguably, the brightest young builders in the world. It's just this wonderful barometer on what great looks like. It's a really good day to spend to benchmark the deal flow that you're seeing and benchmark the founders that you're seeing and just compare and contrast, right? Because you just get a lot of reps at seeing a lot of pitches in one day. So I love YC Demo Day. But where I'm going with that is like, I don't have a platform yet where I can maybe be, how it's described, like algorithmically, capture a certain corner of a market and just be the index on great, smart, young founders who are largely outsiders and put them and turn them into insiders, right? And so I need to find those examples of like great all around me. So I think of Schwabe, I think of, watching a whole bunch of pitches at Demo Day. And what I do know, and I think every investor needs to do this, you need to understand like what are your core skill sets. I think like you got to understand what your core skill set is from like a value prop, but also your core skill set probably in like underwriting and assessing founders. And so I know like one of the things that I really like lean into a lot is, I had the privilege of signing off on over 200 hires while I was at Motive. I had folks around the world, folks in San Francisco. We eventually went remote. I hired a lot of people. And if I got good at one thing at Motive, it was hiring people. And I actually think like, definitely like founder is not a job like any other, but there's certain things like you can test for and assess for and use, really what you're doing is you're hiring is, does this person have like the grit and tenacity to do this thing? We all know what the thing at the other end looks like. We're trying to create, companies that are worth, a billion, if not more, in 10 years. And can you assess for that? So I'm using a lot of my interview skills and almost like hiring for what great might look like in that role. And I've never been a founder too. And I think that's okay as well. I've been very close to founders, but a lot of the roles that I hired for, I never gotten that job either. And I think there can be some like principles that you use to hire for greatness.
Well, I'm going to challenge that, and it gives a good jump off. Like you are a founder, and you're a solo GP, which,
Sure.
and
I think there's parallels, but like I would
yeah,
be
I get it.
very, very careful saying to an entrepreneur of a technology startup
Right.
that I'm a founder. I think that would be insincere. There's the resilience component. But I don't have to necessarily build a technology product. And I probably will never hire as many people again as I did at Motive
At
inside
least
of
we hope not. I'm sure your LPs hope not, or
it.
but maybe we could
I know
turn.
funds are getting pretty big now, so maybe there's a world where we
Oh
need.
man, I've done the same as you. I ran divisions at Bank of America and Vanguard, and I have an associate. Shout to Chad, but I don't envy that part of it. There's a good part of this show that we have other people who are either solo GPs themselves or aspiring, they're solo GP curious.
Mhm.
If I could take that point and kind of jump on from saying you're not a founder, not true.
Mhm.
At least for that part of the audience, you most certainly are. Like, can you give some commentary? Like, how'd you decide to be a solo GP? Was it always in design? Have you thought about other things? Just give a little commentary why you picked this particular structure and endeavor this way.
Yeah. So when I was operating at Motive, and actually, like, even before I joined Motive in my first startup, I was the first person stateside. More often than not, I would be the first person in our company to meet with a VC. It's just like that's how the encounter happened. And I always thought, like, dang, that seems like a fun job. I think I'm motivated by variety. I really enjoy learning and I love learning about a whole bunch of different things. And I just thought, man, that could be an endlessly stimulating job. And so when I was at Motive, the more successful a company becomes, the more concentrated you get in that one company. And so your learning goes very, very, very deep. But oftentimes that learning gets rather specific to the context of your customers, your company, and specific to the growth that you're having. And some of it's transferable for sure, but a lot of it gets very like, especially when it's moving quickly, you get the blinders up and you're really only focusing on the task at hand. And so I knew that maybe on the other side of Motive being, the success that it is, I didn't want to go as concentrated again on one company. I wanted the variety. And so I'd been a scout with Index Ventures while I was at Motive. And one of the things that like was giving me a lot of energy was taking the things that I was learning and using that to help these entrepreneurs that I was investing in. So I'd known for a long time that I wanted to get into VC. I didn't think that it would be though as like a solo GP initially. I thought like scout with Index, maybe Motive IPOs, and I make the hard play and I go ask Index or I go ask all these other firms that I'm friends with if I can just come work there. But as I did more and more of that scout investing, I learned that I had like a really special wedge. And I also run the world's largest meetup for customer success. So I knew everybody in customer success. And I could see how, yeah, the story that I was sharing was really resonating with entrepreneurs and they really wanted to work with me. And there was actually one deal where for the first time, like the founder told me, hey, we're going to include you and we're not going to include this other person in our round.
Hmm.
And I was like, interesting. Like, huh. Like I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought like, you're so naive when you start doing this. And I was like, huh, like my value prop kind of stands out on its own. And so it was then that I was like, maybe the best way into doing this is not by joining a bigger firm, but by just like doing it on my own. And at the same time, I'd connected with Jay Poe over at Stage 2 Capital, Paul and Scott and Max at Go to Market Fund. I'd seen like, that they were having some early success. And I thought, man, like, I think I could do that. And so, yeah, so I decided, hey, well, this is what we'll do. I went back to basically everybody who'd ever been on a panel at the customer success meetup. So every CCO, every VP of customer success in Silicon Valley, I asked them all to join me as LPs. Most of them said yes. We're now like 140 LPs. Majority of them are the best CS leaders in the world. And so it was like, solo GP kind of like found me. I think like,
I didn't choose. We're gonna get like a Tupac T-shirt, right? It's like I didn't choose solo GP life. GP life, solo GP life chose me.
chose me. Yeah. And so it was just like, yeah, you have to, be really honest with yourself about like, what is your value prop? What is it? What is your spike? What is the thing that, makes you stand out? And like, what is the best way to use that set of things on the field, right? Actually, it's interesting. One of the catalysts, one of the things that I couldn't get out of my head is a piece of advice. Shardul led the seed in Wiz. Wiz is obviously one of the biggest outcomes of all time, $32 billion. I remember like, even before he's a scout with Index, going to Index and just like trying to meet as many people as I could, just like study, like, how do I get into VC? And the advice that Shardul gave me was, hey, look, you don't need to be an expert in everything, but like you need to have a spike so that when a question on this topic comes up, you're the first person the world calls on this topic. And he's like, I don't know if customer success as a category is ever an investment category that is going to be special enough for Index to just have somebody, Shardwell does, security and infrastructure. That's a category where like that can be a specialty. But so he's like, I don't know if like that's a category that we would ever have anybody staff full time to go after. But it certainly is a spike that you have. So just like think about that. And like, if ever you were to join Index, I'd want to make sure that your name is just like in every conversation on that topic. And if I like start to hear about you through the grapevine, just like even when it's not about you, it's just on this topic and your name comes up, that's how you know you're onto something special. And so I always like had that in the back of my head. And really it was like seeing what the guys at GTM Fund and Stage 2 were doing. It was, I knew I had this spike. And I knew that I could already win access to these really great founders. And I knew that the value prop resonated with them. So it was like all of these things coming together. Getting it, off the ground was harder than I ever imagined. But that's a story for another day.
Yeah, we'll have you back, and we'll trade war wounds on that, because I feel, I mean, I love this. Like, I didn't choose solo GP, like solo GP, and it's really about that spike and getting. It's a really cool story. Like, hey, I want you. I'm going to kick out other people. And that's a really cool story. Like you and I could talk all day, and I'll just look forward to the next time of stuff too. So I'm going to just try to like bring some of this home, because I'm sure you have like other stuff to do, and like LPs to court and founders to talk to, etc. I mean, if I had to start thinking about, like, for some of the audience that is looking to you, and I look up to you as, like your last update, I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing, dude. I'm so excited for you. What is for those who are aspiring to get to where you are in it? Like, what's the advice you would give anybody who's thinking about doing what you're doing or we're doing would be?
Oh man, I'm still not where I want to be yet. And I think like, I don't know. I think
I'm sorry if I'm holding you up, but hey, listen, when you send your last note, and you can let me know if we have to bounce, and we'll wrap this up quick.
It's good.
I pushed my other one. I wrote you right after like your last note, and I was like, dude, I'm so excited for you. I'm trying to get to where you are. So if nothing else, then forget everyone else, just for me.
Yeah.
Like, what's advice you have for me or people like me who are just, we're trying to get to the finish line of our own funds, or people trying to think through, hey, do I take the dip or not? Like, what would be, a couple bits of advice, or at least mistakes you would want them to not replicate from your experience?
I think like number one, like, it's a brutally lonely journey at times getting a fund one off the ground. And so like the starting place is like, somebody like thinking it's like, make sure you just like going into it, have that conviction in yourself, and like make sure that like you build that highlight reel of like how that this can be a thing. Like write those things down and like revisit that highlight reel often, because like more people are going to say no than say yes. You're going to think you're crazy. You're going to see, you're going to look at your personal bank account and you're going to say, whoa, this sucks.
So just jump right into my, like, just like, you want to pour any salt in here too?
Yeah, right. So you're going to go through all those things. And I think like what you need to do is like, you need to have that highlight reel. You need to revisit it. And you really like, you do have to practice. Like, you're an athlete. I come from an athlete background too, and studied a lot of like sports psychology. And like, I think the power of like positive self-talk is really, really important. And so you need that highlight reel because you need some, the number one thing I think to like will a fund one into existence for somebody who isn't a career investor, or isn't coming from, a tier one. It's just resilience. Like, I really believe that the person who will hammer on this harder and work harder and push is the person that like will win in the end. So just going into it, yeah, you gotta build that personal highlight reel. You gotta set those reminders, and you need like at least one person. I think I'm not strong enough to do it alone. You need at least like one person in your life who like really believes in you. So for me, like, my wife is like that person. Like, there's so many times like just, you know, she's played that highlight reel back to me, like, giving you the like, keep your head up, like you're doing this. This is good. I got you. Don't worry. So I would say, yeah, those are the two things. Like at least one other person who believes, and that highlight reel. And I think if you have that, you can probably do it. And I think,
I wrote that
yeah,
down. Highlight reel, like your own highlight reel. Like that's gold, man.
yeah, yeah, and replay it often. And I think too, like, here's the tricky thing about building a fund that I think I struggled with early. And in startups, you can get a lot of shots on goal in your customer discovery. And you can like, do customer discovery, and when you can mess up and you can kind of fail and you can miss the mark. But in most categories where you're building a venture backable company, there's enough companies, or hopefully there's enough companies there that like, you know, you can look like a fool early and there's still more, and so you get better with every pitch. And I think like one of the, we're not building, let's say, a product per se. Well, we are in venture, but like there's a certain component of us finding like the language market fit to share what we do.
Mm.
And I think like you really have to be listening, because it's so hard to get an LP lead. So very hard, right? There's only so many people deploying into VC. Maybe it's less people right now. Even if you connect to them, there's, everybody has their own thesis. Everybody is looking for something, a little bit different based off of, what their view of the world is. And so you just have to be so tuned in. Like you need to take notes on every single call and learn. And every time you get a no, you have to like do that postmortem, and you have to understand, why you're not a fit. You have to ask those questions. Sometimes people won't give you the answers. So you have to like really listen and read between the lines. And you have to use all of that to find that language market fit. And it's harder, I think, in that way than being a startup founder. It's because there's just like this limited pool. And so those at bats happen less often. And so you really need to treat each of them as a gift.
Yeah. I love this language market fit. I again, that went right underneath highlight reels. This has been amazing. Let me try and like get this in and put a bow on this, because I would jam with you all day for sure. The thing I like to ask is our final fast four questions at the end, and some of it I'm just curious about it. Really quickly going through just what was the best day you've had as an investor so far with Success V.
Man, like there's been a lot of like highlight reel moments. It certainly feels good every time an LP commits. But I think the thing that like feels really, really, really awesome is like when a world-class entrepreneur chooses you, because those are the proof points that like you've got something. And so like I think about, Amanda Kahlo. She started Sixth Sense, which is a $5.2 billion business now. She created, the marketing intent category. She has a company called OneMind now. When I met Amanda, her round was basically closed. Primary was leading. Primary writes a very big check. Amanda opened up a closed round to include Success VP. And that, man, did that feel really good, because like here you have this second time entrepreneur who believes that they can make a dent in the universe. Like, once again, said to me on the call, like, I know sales, I know marketing, I've created category before. I'm better at that than like, most people. The one regret I had on company number one is I didn't pay close enough attention early on to customer success. success. I'm opening up this close round to include you because I know how important customer success was.
That's awesome.
And I was like, yes, okay. And so like I go back to like those moments often, and you're going to get a lot of no's on the LP side, but like I think like you have to like anchor yourself on those like those three things that make a venture capital firm great. Sourcing. Are you seeing really good deals? Right? Are people sending you stuff? So it's a great day every time I open up my inbox.
That's awesome.
And it's 200, then I'm like, oh, how am I going to handle this? That's a great day. When you win a deal, that's a highlight reel thing. And I don't know if I'm any good at picking yet. So that's part of the highlight reel that we'll delay.
We'll find out later.
When I get the updates from founders about the progress that they're having, those are great days as well too, because there's a line of sight to the fact that you're picking the right ones.
I'm going to preview the next three and just see how, because I love how you're weaving them together. I want you to tell me about the worst day you've had as an investor. I'd love for you to think you've shouted out a lot of people, but is there anyone else you would like to shout out really quickly that was so helpful for you, either double down or haven't mentioned yet? And then my last one, and I'm giving you time to kind of percolate all this. Like you talked about your kids now, 7 and 4. I'm really curious, how would you like to be remembered in their eyes for what you're doing today? So worst day, shout out, and then a legacy question about your kids, because I think about my kids all the time in terms of what I do. So I would love your commentary on all three, and then I'll let you get out of here and generate alpha.
I love it. I think like the worst days have been the no's, and like you get a lot of no's, but the worst days have been like those gut punch days when you maybe had like a verbal yes and the story changes and you're waiting on it. I've had a lot of those, days where you thought, oh man, okay, the fund is done. Here we go. And then boom, you get punched right in the gut on that one. Oh, like, we're no longer deploying into VC. And you're like, wait a minute, like we just spent the last 6 months. Like that doesn't even seem like the real answer. So is, or hey, if you can just get to the halfway point of your fund, we'll come in. And then you get to the halfway point on the fund and the bar changes. Like, and I get why folks do things like that. I understand. But man, it doesn't make you feel any better. Those are really, really hard when you see all of those highlights that you're having in other places in your fund building journey, and you're like, gosh, how come you don't get it? So those are the worst days. That's probably typical for every emerging manager. So you got to be resilient. You got to get through them. Shout outs, man. I think there's so many people that I would not be here were it, not for them believing in me. I'm going to give you a laundry list. I would say like, one of the people who really like helped will the fund into existence was my lawyer, actually, Teal Liddell. I don't know if you work with Teal. Teal is awesome. He's almost like in-house counsel. But I had some like tricky things to navigate early on with my fund, and were it not for Teal, I don't think I would have got like the full spectrum of information I needed to make the right decision for my fund. So Teal is game changing. I would say like every LP that came in, all of the operators, the CCOs, every single one, like their belief, whether it was a 10K check on the first close, a 50K check later, $250,000 check, like, the minimums grew. Each time somebody believes. So like those LPs know who they are. I would say like, an accelerant was Mar and Pejman at Pair. Mar and Pejman have an emerging manager program. They're both on the Forbes Midas list. Having their support has been pretty fantastic. Kathleen Estrich, if you know her, she's somebody, you ought to know in your emerging manager journey. She kind of recognized the value prop of Success VP early and brought me into the fold at Pair, and the mentorship that I've got from, Mar and Pejman has been pretty awesome. David Sachs is another person. David was the second check into the fund. So to have somebody like that believe in you early,
that's a big one.
Shout out. Jason Lemkin. He gives us the stage at SaaStr every year. That's really cool. My partners in crime on the meetup, Monica Perez and Janan Peng. Monica's the head of customer success at Notion, and Janan's the head of customer success at Intercom. We run the customer success meetup together. They get a shout out. So the list is I feel like
you are blessed, my friend. With
yeah, I've got a really cool crew of folks who believe in me. Which Adiemi at Base 10, he's another one who's been really good. Him and Reggie.
Amazing. How do you want to be remembered? We'll get out on a personal note, because we started with surfing and snowboarding as people, and we'll finish with fatherhood, another area we share. How do you want your kids to remember you and what you do with Success VP 7 and 4? How would you describe that? How do you want to be remembered?
Man, I think about this a lot. I lost my dad when I was pretty young. And so I realized just like how fleeting, you have a daughter who's going to Dartmouth next year, right? You probably have like blinked, and you know how fast those childhood years can go, right? It's like my 7-year-old, I can't believe she's 7. In 10 years, she'll be 17. She'll be, ready to go to college, just like like your daughter is. And I sometimes think like, yeah, it's just amazing all that will happen in 10 years. And so the thing that like, I hope my kids see is like just a dad who worked really, really hard for them and was able to navigate, a big goal, very resilient, worked very hard at it, but always let them be, first. And so I just like, we talked offline about, some of the ways in which I've oriented my life. Some of those things, could be a little bit of a head scratcher for some people, but I've created a really special setup in my life that, lets me be very present in my kids' lives. And so, yeah, I hope my kids, they probably don't appreciate that when they're little, but hopefully when they're, 30 or 40 or all grown up, they're like, man, like we had a really cool childhood, and like, dang, like our dad worked really hard for us. And like, dang, I don't remember my dad missing that track and field event or that band event, because I know for me, like with my dad, I lost him when I was pretty young, and I know that he had, a pretty intense job, and I know that he traveled a lot for his work, but I also don't remember my dad ever being absent from any of my big hockey games. So I hope that's the case for me. And
that's huge.
Yeah,
that's huge. Wow, I can't think of a better place to leave it.
That's why we're working so hard. Like,
hell yeah.
That's why we're trying to like do these things. Like, that's a big motivator in my life, is like, I want to make sure that I can provide for my family in a meaningful way. That's a driver.
Listen, man, this has been a huge blessing. Like, look, if anyone thinks founder-led sale, customer success, they're going to associate you, and you're out there all the time. If founders or LPs or other GPs want to reach out, what's the best way to get a hold of you? What's the best way to find you on the interwebs?
Definitely send me an email, john@successvp.com. Read my Substack.
You should. It's good. I do.
Yep. Thank you. Come to one of our meetups, New York City Customer Success Week. Just type that into Google. Probably the only thing that you're still typing into Google, but just type, New York City Customer Success Weekend. We'll hook you up with a ticket if you send me an email. I'll definitely, Mike, like hook up all your portfolio companies with tickets. So that'll be good. A little bit of extra value add on top of the value add you already offer. And those are the ways.
Awesome. Listen, hey, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I really look forward to just continue reading you, working with you, and I wish you nothing but the more success. And I can't wait till we end up on a cap table together. I really can.
Me too. All right, let's do it. High five.
Until everyone, this is Mike Ma leaving another episode of Alone Together. Thanks, Jen, for showing up. And then please, if you like this content, please like and subscribe if you made it all the way here. And I'll see you next time.
Awesome.